chapters 40 to 48, God will build a temple right where Al-Aqsa is, right? So God's going to build a temple there. And that temple is where he'll house his word, the Holy Lord Jesus Christ, right? And the third temple replaces this Islamic system currently in Jerusalem. Now, we don't hate Muslims. I love Muslims and I want them to see salvation. But salvation only comes through Jesus Christ alone. It can't come through any man. It only comes through Christ, who is God, according to our theology. So the third temple is basically that. It's the house that Christ will build when he comes for his millennial reign.
So my question is, I saw that you had a dispute with those guys over there, right? Presumably you're both Christian. So
what guys? I don't know what guys.
The guys that were screaming Christ is King, Bob the Builder.
Oh yeah, Bob. Bob is not a Christian.
Okay.
He denies the tenets of Christianity because the tenets of Christianity are founded in the Bible. He believes in prayers to saints, which the early church describes as Gnostic. Praying to other gods is Gnostic. Only God, who's omnipotent and omnipresent, can hear us.
Bob's Catholic?
Yes.
I see.
Yes, he's Catholic. And he adheres to Catholic tradition. I've seen him multiple times in my own personal walk with him. Go and pray to saints and pray to Mary and bow down before the Eucharist. So he's definitely a Catholic. But the issue is, he doesn't want to debate these terms. He thinks that we could just sweep it under the rug and not care. But we can't. Because the Bible tells us in Galatians 1:8-9, if anybody has another gospel, let them be accursed.
Okay.
I want to ask you, you're not religious, right?
Not at all.
Why are you not religious at all?
I don't think we as like human beings with our senses and our functions on the material world, I don't think we have access to what the metaphysical truth may be, whether there is a God or there isn't. I don't really think it matters that much. I'm not like highly interested in it. I think what matters is that you contribute to the things that you can control in the most positive way you can for other people, for your own sake, and try and not make the world shittier than you left it. That's pretty much all I care about.
I'd argue, look, that kind of leads to nihilism. Do you know what nihilism is, by the way?
But I don't think it's necessarily bad.
I mean, in a lot of ways it is, though, and I will explain why. First of all, societies are not built on nihilism. There's no societal structure that's built on nihilism, because hope for salvation, hope for an eternity, is imprinted and built within the human psyche. The denial of such things is more of a new invention. Even early scientists were theistic. Galileo Galilei, René Descartes. Okay, so I mean, it's important to understand that the foundations you believe in are not early. People didn't believe them for millions of years. Neither did they incorporate to a functioning society. The society we've got now, the laws in this country, are based upon something called common law. Common law is based upon Christian ethics. The reason why, of course, you today, are you Christian, by the way? Not Christian. Yeah, I know he is. Are you a British citizen?
No, I'm American.
You're American, right? So even in your country, right, those laws were built upon Christian moral ethics, right? So those things you take for granted, for example, because I'd argue you as an agnostic are taking for granted the moral ethics of those people.
For sure.
But the issue is, they're not real for you. For example, let me ask you a question, right? So let's say somebody comes in with a gun, threatens to shoot your family, right? Would you say that's a bad thing?
Probably, yeah.
Why would it be bad?
Because if everybody just decided, if it was the case that there was a societal rule, an ethical rule, that it was acceptable to just shoot people for whatever reason, society necessarily falls apart. It's bad for me, it's bad for that person, because whatever society I want to construct, right, allowing this kind of thing is not beneficial for any human being.
But why should anybody care about whether society functions or not?
Because you live in it, because it affects you.
Why should I care about living?
If you don't, then I guess you could swan dive off a rooftop.
For example, let's say there's tons of crop right now harvested for vegans to eat, right? I'm not saying you're a vegan, right? Tons of crops, right? Tons of animals being killed. They seem to, in this society, have less value than we do. But if we're going by your logic, they should have equal value as us.
Not necessarily.
But why would they have less value than us? Why would we be more value?
I can't.
And why would society mean anything?
I can't fairly
if we're just alive, and that's the only reason why.
I can't fairly assume that an animal has like a similar consciousness or sentience to a human being. So I don't regard them as highly. You and I are both human beings, right? We have similar underlying structures. I have a conscious experience that I want to protect, that I want to preserve, that I want to maximize. I assume you have the same thing. I think that's a fair assumption given that we have the same, build of like.
How do you know we have the same build?
We're both human beings. We both have brains, frontal lobes, hypothalamus. Like the same underlying structures exist in both of us.
But so do monkeys.
That's true, but they're not the same. The human brain, the similarity between our brains are much closer than that between like me and a monkey. right? So I can assume that you and I share a conscious experience that is more similar. I can't prove this. I could be wrong. I guess.
You can't prove that.
No, I can't.
But nor can you prove that it's rational to believe that I share in anything. For example, how do you know, for example, let's say the monkey, right? The monkey, for example, the ape, for example, it has 99 or something DNA. It shares it with us,
very
right?
close.
And yet many people would view that monkey as a lower form or primitive form animal, right? You're in Africa, right? And you're seeing a human behave the same way as a monkey. So by your own standard, do you think that human being should be shot and put down?
No.
What if it becomes aggressive?
Well, if it's going to threaten to kill me, then yeah.
No, it just becomes aggressive.
Aggressive in what way? What do you mean?
Threatens you.
I'd probably run it. Like if there's nothing keeping me in the situation, there's nothing compelling me to stay in the situation, I'll probably just leave the situation.
Do you believe in like people like that should be encaged or entrapped?
No, not generally.
And yet monkeys who have the similar makeup and who are of the same sort of mindset as some, like let's say the Sentinel tribe, right? They eat raw flesh, right? Okay, and monkeys will do that same thing.
But the behavior,
they themselves are not entrapped, but do you believe they should be entrapped?
the behavior is not really what I'm concerned with. What I'm concerned with is
I'm not talking about behavior, I'm talking about the makeup in general.
Sure,
Okay.
but-
So because the atheist dilemma, I'm not saying you're an atheist, the atheist dilemma is that evolution dictates how we are, right? And through billions upon billions of genetic mutations, through successive phylogenetic trees, right, we've come into reality, right? So the monkey, who's supposed to be a lower form, does the same thing as the Sentinel tribe does, right? The exact same thing, right? What value does the Sentinel tribe have over the monkey?
well, it's a fundamental human consciousness that I can only assume that they have, right?
But that's a faith-based belief. Do you understand?
I understand that, but I think the leap. So I think on a fundamental level, everybody's understanding of reality has some amount of like fundamental assumption, right? You cannot rely on your senses to really tell you anything about what's true, because if it is the case that you've evolved to be the way that you are, right?
But by that own logic, I'm sorry, then you can't state emphatically
No.
that there's no truth either.
I don't
And
think-
even that claim you just made, you can't make that statement either. It's irrational. So the claim that you made that there's no objectivity, that's a false claim.
Well, you have to make some fundamental assumptions to be able to even function in the world, right? So I cannot prove that other people share my conscious experience, right? I cannot even prove that the things that I'm seeing, hearing, and tasting, whatever, are real, because it could be the case that my brain deceives me because it's better for my survival for it to do so.
But do you live like that?
No, of course not, because there's nothing functional about that.
So you assume when you wake up that your brain is functioning normally. You're assuming when you look out the world you're actually seeing real things.
Everybody makes these assumptions.
But you were telling me that you don't care about the idea that there may have been a God functioning the entire planet.
If you could demonstrate it one way or the other, like
Hold on. Now the narrative's changed, right? Remember, you've told me that you can't rationally deduce. You have to assume that reality is what it says it is.
the reason
But
why,
I must produce proof to you.
the reason why, right? It's not really a change in answer. Is that I don't think it can be demonstrated, so I just don't care that much about it, right? It's basically the same answer. If it could be demonstrated somehow, I guess I would care more about it, but I don't think it is possible to demonstrate the existence of a God one way or the other. You can point out coincidences and patterns in history, right? But that's not enough for me.
Let's follow that example. It's a bit loud here. Let's follow that example, right? So, first of all, you've got people living on Earth, right? Thousands of years, right? We've got historical documents telling us that a Jesus Christ existed, right? We've got people dying for this fact. I'm not saying that's proof of it, but you've got people dying for this fact, right? And millions believing that Christ existed, and tens of thousands believing in near-death experiences, not just of Jesus Christ, but many of them of Jesus Christ. What then do you make of this information?
I mean, it's obviously there's something very important and powerful that underlines all of this, right? Whether or not I can assert that is a God for sure, no. That indicates to me a cultural phenomenon of people trying to explain their realities, right? And maybe there is value in that explanation. I'm not like a theologian. I don't know much about religion. I haven't studied it extensively. So it would be irresponsible and cynical of me to be like, oh, it's definitely not true, or it's all fake bullshit. And it would also be irresponsible of me to say, oh, it's definitely true, because I don't know, right?
I'll say what is truth is founded in objectivity. Now you're telling me that you don't have a certainty about the rationality of what you see, right? But that's a contradiction if you're asking me to produce evidence. Are you telling me that if you saw God's foot right now, you believe in God? Let's say you see a giant foot just drop from the sky. Would you believe that God exists if I was able to produce that?
I would need more information about what the foot is. I wouldn't make an assumption one way or the other. It's definitely remarkable. Like it would be an insane thing
What
to
if the
happen.
talking foot said to you, I am God? What's your name, by the way?
Adam.
Adam. I am God, Adam. Worship me, right? Would you believe that?
That's an interesting question. If the talking foot said, "I am God, worship me," would I believe that? I might, but not. I don't think that would be a rational thing to do. I might just because it's such an insanely a remarkable mystical thing. But there's not really any information for me to like prove that foot is God. You know.
So I mean, the thing is, because I'm trying to test what you would define as evidence.
What would change
right?
my mind, right?
The issue is though, is I could say, because I used to be an atheist myself. I'm not saying you're an atheist. I'm saying I used to be an atheist, right? I could say, well, hold on. How do I know that it's not a hologram that Bill Gates made up? How do I not know that? So to the same degree, you would have to have some sort of faith in the rationality of how you view the world.
Yeah.
I would argue having faith is not a bad thing when it comes to a god or gods. And I would argue the way we see the world, if I'm making an empirical argument, do you know what empirical is?
Yes, yeah.
So if I'm making that, so from the knowledge we know, right, from what we can understand, things come from things. If you go back to the background radiation of the Big Bang, things come from things.
Every cause has a subsequent.
Exactly. And all we're saying is that cause must exist outside of us. Now, I believe consciousness has a fount, and that fount is found in Christ. It's found in God. Okay. Now, the reason why I would say that is because of the impossibility of the contrary. Nothing makes sense if I take your position. It doesn't make sense for me to believe it's rational to believe 1 + 1 = 2. How do I know that? It doesn't make sense for me to believe that when I wake up, I won't float up to the sky or something.
Everybody has to make a fundamental assumption, right? That they cannot rationally justify, right? Religious people have to do it when they assert that God is real, right? Even though there's empirically this is a difficult position to prove. Right?
I would say it's a difficult to prove. So I would say, in fact, for the possibility of the contrary, if you assume rationality, you're assuming some sort of objective to reality. But you've just said it's basically like irrational to believe that there's objective to reality.
But I'm honest about the fact that I truly don't have access to.
No, I understand.
Yeah. So it's not so much that I'm assuming that there is an objective reality because it's the only way that human beings can function, right? But I have no way to demonstrate that objective reality is true. I think everybody makes some kind of fundamental assumption like this, right? It's just about whether or not they're aware of it, right? At some level, you ask somebody why enough times, they don't have an answer for you, right? And that's kind of across the board. Religious people, right? For them, that fundamental assumption is God. For me, because there's so much constructed in these religious narratives about who or what God is and all the things that they have done, right? I find that leap is much greater, right, than just a leap of there is some objective reality that I'm observing, something about my senses maps onto something that's real, and that I share a similar conscious experience with all people like me, right?
But that's an assumption.
Those are all assumptions.
And the other thing,
my
look.
assumption is less ridiculous than ridiculous is not fair, right?
Yeah.
It's less of a leap than the religious assumption.
I used to make the same sort of arguments as you, right? There's so many gods, so many religions, how do we know which one's true? But that's just sort of like a fallacy of category. Have you heard of that? Okay, it's a category fallacy. So it's basically what I'm saying, there's so much chocolates, how do I know which one's actually chocolate? Or there's so much, there's so much humans, how do I know which one's humans? You have to assess it, and that's a big thing to do. But I would say this, is that the inclination of our heart, and this is where it becomes more about ourselves, the inclination of our heart leads us to rationality. I'm sure if somebody came in to try and murder your family, you would want to stop that.
Yeah.
A monkey would want to stop that. I'm sure if somebody wanted to come in and rape, let's say somebody you love, you would want to stop that. But a monkey wouldn't want to stop that. There's something within us that's, sorry for spitting my spot you. There's something within us that's more rational than the mere beast of the earth. The question is, what is the base of that? And where does that come from?
And that could just be a function of our brains being fundamentally different from other creatures.
The problem is scientists have not agreed with that either.
Yeah,
scientists would be in our position.
Human knowledge is imperfect. That's the truth of the matter, right? I'm honest about the fact that human knowledge is imperfect. There's some things that we just don't know, and I think the metaphysical existence of a god or a higher being is one of those things. It's pretty damn difficult to demonstrate.
I would say that if we've been created with the faculties of communication and love, I would say these things do come from somewhere, okay? And I would say it's personal to every human being to seek out what this is. What is love? What is rationality? What is reason? Why is it 1 + 1 always equals 2? Why is it we have rationality? Why is it our hearts yearn for love or relationships or the way the mother loves the son, stuff like that, right? And I would say this is found within the righteousness that Christ teaches, right? But the only way to get through Christ is you must be born again. And that's what Christ teaches. So what I'd honestly call you to do is to read the gospel for yourself. It's not hard to do. I mean, I would start with the book of John. And then Christ says, as he says to me, if you need to know him, if you truly want to seek him, then seek him out. He's there. Pray to him if you can. And he will come to your heart and change you.
I have every intention of, like, eventually, I guess, when I stop being lazy, going through a lot of the major religions and seeing what is said, what assertions are made, what, like, historical evidence there is to conform with one assertion over the other. Like, I am interested in religion, right? But I guess more like...
You don't need to do that.
More like sociologically, I guess.
I'm telling you, you don't need to do it.
Academically.
You don't need to go through Buddhism, Jainism. You don't need to go through it. What I'm saying to you is cry out to God and let him guide you. If there truly is a God, right? This is what we're doing. We're testing it, right? If there truly is a God, cry out to him. Say, Jesus, come to me. If you are real, come to me. Let him be your guide. And if it's wrong, it's wrong. If it's right, it's right. I'm not here to force you to anything. I'm not trying to sell anything to you. I'm really not getting paid for doing any of this. Literally.
I wasn't going to give you money anyway.
Thank you, because I wouldn't accept it. But yeah, no, it's really just about the love of Christ. The reason why I do this is because of the love of Christ. And the reason why I rejected the atheistic ideals of things being just subjective is just simply this, that it just doesn't make sense in the world we live in to believe that there's nothing to this planet. There clearly is something in the acts of doing kindness. There clearly is something in the stopping. Oh, sorry. There clearly is something in doing just acts, like the judges, like the police. Those institutions were started by religious people. They weren't started by atheists.
Religion is a compelling reason to be ethical. I don't think it's the only one though. Just because I'm saying, like, I'm not confident that there is a God or there isn't, right? Doesn't necessarily mean that there is nothing to the world, that there's nothing to like being just and being a good person. That stuff is meaningful and fulfilling in that you're contributing to the world around you being a little bit better, right, in ways that you care about.
So it's illogical.
What do you mean it's illogical?
Well, it would be illogical, right? If there's no ground or foundation to the ethics that I espouse, I'm just a monkey, right? I've been evolved to this state, right? I'm just doing something I've been evolved to do. There's no real fact in it. And if I want to go out and replicate, like you know, evolution has the old natural selection. If I want to do that and decide to rape, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with that. There's nothing intrinsically wrong with me smacking you on the face, which I wouldn't do. But there's nothing intrinsically wrong with that. Whereas in the Christian religion, Christ calls us to love our neighbour as ourselves, to love the Lord our God with all our heart and mind and soul, because that which is moral transcends all humans. If we don't have that, then morality is subjective. You can believe what you want to believe, I can believe what I want to believe, and if I go out there and act it, who cares? I'm just an evolved ape, just like you. And who are you to say that I'm wrong? That's just your opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it is... At the end of the day, a lot of ethics are like an assertion of a preference. It's about constructing rules for society that make a better world for human flourishing. What kind of world do you want to see, right? How you like what kind of lives do you want people to live, right? And if you're interested in human happiness, that's kind of where you construct your ethics.
Why should humans flourish? Why not ants?
Well, because we're humans and we care about ourselves and we care about our own flourishing.
So basically, the whole reason why you should be good is for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. But
and you see the difference, because the reason I'm giving to you that you should be good is apart from yourself. It's not selfish.
I understand.
That's a selfish preservation of yourself.
Yeah,
the reason why you should be good in Christianity is because it's a selfless act. When Christ died on the cross, it was a selfless act. Right? But what you're telling me is that you should be selfish. You just seek to preserve yourself for the sake of yourself. But that leads to another problem. Who are you to say that it's right to be selfish in one situation but not another? Let me give you an example. Right? Rape. Who are you to say that I don't have the right to go out there for my own self-pleasure and enact that act out and that be wrong? Who are you to tell me that?
Oh, the position that I would say that rape is wrong from is that personally, right? I don't want to be raped. I don't think anybody wants to be raped.
That's just your opinion.
Yeah, it is, but it's the opinion.
And you said you don't think, but who cares what you think?
But it's the opinion in the collective. People generally don't want to be raped, so that is something that we go after.
You're saying people, this is arbitrary. How do you know people that want to be raped? There's many people probably that do want to be raped. How do you know they don't want to be?
I imagine that is few and far between, especially since if you want to be raped, right, that kind of defies the definition of rape, because rape is non-consensual by, like, design, you know what I mean?
Right, but the reason why there's rape laws in the first place is because of Christian ethics. So it just goes back to my side again.
Well, there's plenty
But if we just abolish that, let's say that we get rid of the laws, right? We're going to allow you to make the laws, right? What basis do I have to not go out there and rape, and you to tell me that it's wrong?
The preservation of, like, the human experience and
Why should I care about
happiness. Because people are generally self-interested in their own happiness. Yeah,
that's arbitrary. That's your opinion.
100%. But so is the assertion that, like, a God is real. You know, like
that's not arbitrary.
Well, you're just claiming this thing is objective, right? Because I say so, because God says so, because there's divine authority.
I'm claiming there's in this reality, things come from things.
Yeah.
It's a knowledgeable argument, right? You can see epistemically things come from things. I'm saying the conscious mind comes from a conscious creator. That's what I'm saying.
Well, conscious mind doesn't necessarily have to come from a conscious creator, right?
Well, where else would it come
an
from?
assumption. The same way that my assumption that
Where else would it come from?
I have no idea.
If we live in a reality where things come from things, if I make the most basic empirical argument, then what else would it come from?
I have no idea. It could be something else. But
that's the thing. You see the problem?
It doesn't have to be a conscious creator, right? I think
if you can't give another definition of what it can be, then that poses a problem. Because I'm saying that that's primary.
Sure.
Right? That's foundational. So in order to attack that, you have to provide something that is equal to that has the same properties, and that still gives you a mind.
The fundamental difference between me and a religious person is that I am more comfortable with accepting that there are limits to what I know, right? I don't have, like, a sexy narrative to offer to counter a religious one. Right?
Oh, no, that's assumption. How do you wait? You're assuming that I know everything. I'm assuming that I don't. I'm saying that God knows everything.
Yeah, but you're assuming that there is a God, right?
Yes, because we have conscious minds that comes from somewhere.
Yeah, it does come from somewhere, but I can't assert that it came from a God, right? And
but you can't provide another example of something in which the conscious mind would come from.
Sure, maybe it's a series of physical coincidences that led to the structure of a human brain. You know, after the first, like, singular cell organism was synthesized. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, scientists have actually. Have you heard of, for example, what's his name? Forgot his name off the top of my head. His name's Stephen something. He's a scientist. He's a creationist, by the way.
Stephen something?
Can't remember his name. I have to get it up. But the fact is, right, he says, right, and you can go and look this up if you want to. I'll literally give it to you a bit later on. I've forgotten his name. But the single-celled organism is so complex that it just simply appearing out of nowhere doesn't make any sense.
Well, it's not that it appeared out of nowhere. It's that the idea is, and I am not a scientist, so, you know, my ability to, I guess, argue for the position is not going to be super high. But, like, the idea is that the underlying structures, right, that created the single-celled organism are possible in I forget the name of the time period, but, you know, the primordial soup that everybody talks
about. Talking about a Cambrian explosion.
Yeah.
But that was the diversification of life from a single-celled organism.
Prior to the Cambrian explosion, the primordial ooze or whatever that people refer to, right? There was an experiment, I think in the 1800s, that demonstrated that, like, with the materials that were on Earth at that time, right, given those conditions, you can synthesize amino acids, which are an organic material. And the idea is that repeating this process over and over again, if you can get organic matter out of inorganic matter, right, maybe eventually that can develop into a single-celled organism. It might take, like, in an unbelievable time span, but maybe it's possible. I don't know that that's what happened, right? It's just another guess that people are making based on observing the world around them.
But that would be an assumption. That wouldn't be based on any scientific or historical
It's based on the fact that we know that with those conditions, organic matter can be synthesized from inorganic matter.
But it can't be rational life, and it can't be multiple single-celled organisms.
It could be, maybe given a long enough time scale. We don't know.
But that's an assumption. And this is the issue with scientism again. Like, the presupposition is, the scientists are right. Just believe them.
Not really. The scientists...
Well, I mean, there's no reason to believe that at all. What's the reason? Have you viewed it physically?
No, but the scientists have to demonstrate, right, that they're right, and sometimes they're wrong, and there's a correction of the record that happens over the course of, you know, human civilization.
And you've seen you've seen the biomedical records. You've been there and visited these people, and you've seen what they've done.
No, but I'm as close to that as I'm probably closer to that in knowledge and time scale, right, than any religious person is to the events of the death of Jesus Christ, the resurrection, all that kind of stuff.
But yeah, the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, especially the death of Jesus Christ, is hotly, it really categorized as true according to most historians worth their weight in gold. And remember, Europeans are scientists, right? The field of science is different from the field of historical studies, and yet they still have weight on this planet, right?
Yeah.
So again, I would argue, of course, I can use the same argument. Well, there was a Jesus, he did exist, and he did die.
Right. Our connection, right, to the things that we're trying to assert are basically the same. You're resting on historians, right, that have studied the time.
I'm not just resting on them.
Oh yeah, of course. You have your religious authority that you're attacking on.
No, I'm not just religious authority. I'm resting on the fact that there is objective truth and reality, which I've proven, and you've not shown me the contrary.
No, I don't think you've proven that there's objective truth and reality.
I have, because of the possibility of the contrary.
You've said that there is, right?
Well, I say you have not shown me. You've not given another example where everything's subjective. For example, morality. Can it be subjective? Can child rape be subjective?
Can child rape be subjective?
Yeah, I'm using the worst example on the planet. Can child rape be subjective?
Well, my fundamental assumption is that there is an objective reality. So I'm operating from the foundation that there is.
But that's an assumption.
Exactly, but your objective reality is a similar assumption, right?
Not really.
You accept that.
My objective reality, or the objective reality in it, I have transcends me, and existed for thousands of years.
But how?
Your objective
how do you
reality
connect to that?
comes from your own mind,
But how do
which you believe is not rational.
How do you connect to that? Like how do you know that it's transcends?
Say that again. Sorry, I couldn't hear you. It's a bit loud.
The way in which you navigate the world, right? You have some idea of what had happened before, and that there is an underlying objective reality. What tells you that there is an objective reality?
What tells me there is an objective reality? Well, the patterns I see in the world.
Exactly.
For example, 1 + 1 = 2, right? That's an objective reality. The Mandelbrot set, a study done by a mathematician, leads to if you place a set of numbers and you calculate them over and over again, they create a spiral diagram that goes on infinitely. So infinity does exist. At least we can see that. So if I just use pure scientism, I can come to the conclusion that there is objectives in reality. The question is, where do they come from? Because things come from things, and I've said that's what
Here's the difference between yours and my position, right? Do you accept that, so these things that you've observed, right? Like the proof for infinity, things like this, right? These are things that you've observed with your senses, right? Your eyes, your mouth, your nose, your ears, these kinds of things, right? It is the case that human sense is infallible, right? But it's the only tool that we have, so we have to rely on it. That's my position, right? I accept that there is a hypothetical possibility that the things that I'm seeing, the things that I'm interacting with, my interaction with you is not real, is not objectively true, right? But because I have no other tool to engage with what might be real, right? I just have to assume that it's true.
But the difference
That's the
between me
difference.
and you is I can see, if I assume validity in what I see, then what I can see is an ordered and created world because things come from things. So the only natural conclusion is that things come from things is about what that thing that caused this thing is. Because that's what I can rationally see. It's irrational to claim, well, all of this is just here, but we don't know where it came from.
It's not irrational. I think it's a humble position. It's a position of like.
It's not humble. Right? I've got a phone right here, right? It's not humble for me to say, look, I don't know who made this, and that's a fact. I don't know who made this, but I know somebody made this. If I say, well, nobody made this, I don't know who made it, or I don't think anybody made it, that would be an irrational position.
No. We know that phones come from people, so they're man-made items, so you can assume that a person made that. But a tree or something, right? If you see a tree in nature, you can't assert somebody put this here. It was definitely put here. By what circumstances? I don't know, right?
Well, you can from the possibilities consciously. As I said before, if phones are coming from rational minds, which created them, computers as well are coming from rational minds, then it's about what is behind that rational mind. And the only conclusion we can see, the only conclusion that we're given in reality is that things come from things.
Yeah.
So that for me, that seems to make the most sense.
I agree that there is no. You cannot operate in the world, right, and not accept that there is basic cause and effect. Of course, things come from things, right? The only thing I'm saying is that original thing that you identify as God, right, I have no idea if that is God, right? It could be anything else. It could be something that I can't even conceive of, right?
Well, give an example of what it could be.
Well, like I said, if it's the most typical non-spiritual conception of the world is that there was a giant explosion of energy that created the universe, right? And then everything from there is like a series of cosmic consequences.
Okay, what caused that explosion? Because you said cause and effect, right?
Yeah.
That is a standard most scientists believe in, right?
Yeah.
So what caused that explosion then? The Big Bang? What caused
I have no idea.
And that's the issue. Whereas your ideology leads to an infinite regress, with my ideology it leads to objectives. It's found in something.
So what I'm doing is I'm accepting that there's a gap in my knowledge. I find that what a lot of religion does is like, okay, here's the gap, boom, put God in there, now it all makes sense, right?
Oh no, I'm not doing that at all.
Okay, so
I'm saying that science, logic, reason points to God, and if you're doing science, if you're doing logic, if you're doing rationality, if you're doing all these things that you deny the existence of a God, then there's no rational reason to believe in what you believe in, that there is no God, or that at least there's a possibility there could be other things. You understand where I'm coming from? Because there has to be a fount, there has to be a cause. If I do basic empiricism, I'm going to come to the conclusion that things come from things.
yeah.
So that's not my own.
Why must the cause be God? Because you can't think of anything else?
No, because of course then I would go into the historical argument, the basis for Jesus Christ, the fact that religion has such a providential change in the planet, the idea of ethics, morality not just being something simple, the fact that rationality exists as a thing, and it didn't just appear out of thin air, and that there are many other animals that seem to be involved, and yet they don't have this principle of rationality that we do. So there's so many reasons to believe that something caused us. The question is what that thing is.
Yeah,
I'm saying that is God, and that God has communicated with us. 2,000 years he came on earth, died and rose again, showing that he beat death, and that we can do the same thing. You're telling me, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm saying you can know.
That's why, right? Like I would consider my position to be more epistemically humble. Now, it is the case that if I might study religion and totally change my mind. Like I said,
it's fence sitting. It's not humble.
It is because I'm not.
If I was, let's say, I'm at the war between Hitler and, for example, Hitler's fighting against England, right? And I say, and I've been called to war on each side, right? Because I have dual citizenship, right? And I said, you know what? I'm going to sit here and just ignore it. I'm just going to sit here and ignore it, right? Right, I'm deciding of my own volition to fence it. I'm deciding to ignore the reality around me. And I feel that's what you're doing. I'm not trying to be rude, I'm just saying.
I understand what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
But it's also like, I haven't sat down to study any religion.
I understand.
So I think a lot of people that hold religious views, obviously this is not the case for you given that you were an atheist, a lot of people that hold strong religious views because they came up in a culture and there's a lot of social pressure surrounding the religion, so they feel they're compelled to believe it, right? I am not in that situation, fortunately, which means that my engagement with religion can be more personal and free of like the typical social pressures that inhibit people's abilities to see things like objectively, right? So I do intend on like exploring religion myself, right, in a way that I consider that I deem rational and appropriate, right? And I also accept that there's a possibility my mind might be changed by that, like through the course of that study. Right now, I'm not convinced. I don't find that, saying that just that a religious position is better than my position because you assert that the thing that I say I don't know is God, right? That's just like you just assert that.
That's not my argument, though. That's not my
So my understanding, right? You tell me if I'm wrong about what you're saying, is that things come from things, right? And there's an ultimate like cause that led to every other effect, right? For you, that cause is God, right? That's like the font that creates consciousness.
Right.
For me, it's a question mark. I have no idea, right? So the difference in our positions is just like, okay, well, because there's a tradition of religion, right? That maps onto some history, it must be God, right?
No, that's not my argument.
Okay, so give me a
Okay, so I made an argument from ethics, for example, the idea that we can keep to ethics and it be rational. The idea of rationality has to come somewhere. It has to have an objective fount in something. It's not subjective. And you would agree and I would agree, unless you were some sort of lunatic, that things like child rape are objectively wrong. They're not things you can just agree to. There's no instance in which you can be okay. If I said to you 1 + 1 = 2, you would agree to that. If I said to you 1 + 1 = 2, regardless of who's on earth right now, you would agree for that because that's the most rational position. What I'm saying is if we pull all the evidence together, the historical, the scientific, when you look at the fact that things come from things, right? And then, of course, the spiritual side, the fact that we react to the world in the way we do, the fact that we believe there's rationality on earth, and that when we perceive things, they're truly happening. That has to come from somewhere because of the impossibility of the contrary. Because again, there's no argument against what I've just said,
Why can't-
because it's the possibility
why
to
can't it
control.
come from function?
From functions of what?
Like ethics that remain, the ethics that stick around, typically stick around because they're functional. They make for better societies, right? You have a society where people are raping and murdering each other. That society does not work.
Oh no, that society still exists.
Like,
Saudi, for example, many
Yeah,
of
but
that
it-
slavery still goes on.
sure. Wait, these are unethical practices that take place in other countries, but these are not.
Unethical to according to who?
These are not countries where rape and murder are just permitted, right? Maybe they're not controlled. They're not as controlled as they should be. But if you have a society where everybody's just like, there is no consequence whatsoever to rape and murder. These things are good or okay, right? That's not a functional system for human happiness or human flourishing whatsoever.
But it would still be tolerated, and that would still be a bad thing. To live in a society where rape is tolerated would be a bad thing. Cue in the many sentinel tribes, where they would just rape whatever the women they want. They would do rituals to have sex with women. Ancient Rome did the same thing. They would have orgies, right? In this day and age, these things will be frowned upon, looked down upon. In this day and age, we have abortion, which is the mass murder of kids, right? This is deemed acceptable. Back in the day, it wasn't, and yet it's the elimination of life that could grow up to help people, to bond people. Now, would you say abortion's okay?
This is taking an argument in a way different place. But
No, I'm basically answering a qualified question because I want.
Sure. Yeah. We're going to disagree on abortion, I think.
Okay, fair enough. So if we disagree on that, the issue then is it's not about value in society or even people. It's not about that, because that would be irrational to you, because a child, killing a child, a woman, my bad, a woman killing her child would be okay to you. It wouldn't be okay to me, because I value the preservation of life.
The framing is important here, right? So for me, because I don't consider the potential to be something the thing itself, right? So for me, abortion, right, is permissible up until whatever the child has like a conscious experience, right? So prior to like the development of a frontal lobe or neurons or any of that stuff, I don't really consider it a person yet, right? So
That's a bit weird,
I know it is, but like
because even scientists will say that even if the mind's functioning, the thing is still alive. It's an organism.
no,
It's still
it's
alive.
alive, but I care about personhood. I don't care that much about life, right? 'Cause-
But again, and this falls back to my other question. You value personhood, but you can't account for it rationally.
Well, you can't prove consciousness, or that you can't prove that other people are conscious in the same way that you are, right? This is one of those things that's a fundamental assumption, of course, right? But everybody makes these assumptions. It's just about where they draw the lines, right? You don't know that I share your consciousness. I could be a philosophical zombie, right? But you're making the assumption when you're speaking to me that we share something similar.
Oh no, I made that assumption because Christ is my objective. I believe you're creating an image of God. So that's why I made that
But
assumption.
your assumption is rests on a supplementary or like a more foundational assumption that Christ is real, that God is.
It would be based on the objective reality that Christ is truly God.
Well,
But back to abortion then. So this being, this fetus. By the way, do you know what the term fetus means?
I'm not 100% familiar with like where the zygote becomes a fetus and the fetus becomes I don't know precisely where the terms are. The embryo.
Would you say a fetus should be killed?
I don't know what fetus means typically. Like I know that a fetus is a pre-birth stage, like it's a gestational stage for a child. But if a fetus has like a frontal lobe and neurons and a conscious experience, then no, a fetus shouldn't be killed. But if you have a zygote, which doesn't have any of these underlying structures that create a conscious experience.
I'm not sorry, I didn't mention the word, I mentioned the word fetus.
No, yeah.
Because the majority of the abortions in this country and others are done to fetuses.
Okay,
right?
well, if a
The
fetus,
term fetus means child.
if a fetus is conscious, then I would say no, right? And if the fetus lacks the underlying structures that create consciousness, right, the neurological structures you need to be conscious, then I would say sure.
So if they're not conscious at all, they should be killed.
Not that it should be killed, but it should be permissible. Yeah.
Okay, so if a child is lying on a bed unconscious, they're brain dead, right? They're brain damaged, right? They're not able to wake up. Should it be okay to pull the plug on them?
To what?
Should it be okay to kill a child or pull the plug on that child if they're unconscious?
If the child has brain death, right? Like there's zero activity in the brain whatsoever. There's no there's no possibility that this is a child that can recover from this, right? This is the assumption we're going with?
I'm just asking a basic question.
Sure, yeah.
So if the child's unconscious, I don't know whether it could wake up or it couldn't, right? Remember, unconsciousness was your like sort of ground for killing babies.
When
So
referring to consciousness, it's not like you knock somebody out, they're unconscious. That's not the kind of unconscious I'm talking about, right? The kind of unconscious I'm talking about is like, do you know what?
irrational?
You know what hydroencephalitis is? Have you
No,
heard of
not
this?
off the top of my head.
So it's a condition that happens sometimes. A very, very rare genetic condition where a child is born and most of their brain matter is water, right? It has mirror neurons, so like it'll grab things, but it's really not there. That is not a conscious child. And they don't last very long, they die, right? If it's a condition like this where there is no real brain and it's just like water, most of the material, right? And it's like a shell of a human being, I don't consider it like a person.
What if it's still developing?
What do you mean? What is it?
Well, that's the question I'm asking. What if it's still
You mean
developing?
like prior to the stages of consciousness, it could become conscious later? I don't care that much about that. Yeah.
So you don't care about human flourishing when it comes to them in a pre-human stage, but you care about them flourishing when they are in a post-human
An
state.
important distinction is people, right? What is a person, and then human. Because human is more biological, right? If somebody, like a zygote with like those initial cells, those are human cells. I mean, they have human DNA, right? But that's not what I'm concerned with. What I'm concerned with is the person, right? So if somebody's brain dead, right, and they have zero neurological activity, there's no them coming back. They're just tied up to machines and being like.
So they have no value at that point.
At that point, I kind of consider it like it's about whatever the family wants to do with them. Because for them, right, it's very like.
No, I'm asking you as a personal human being because remember, the conscious state was what you use to determine whether it's ethically right or wrong to kill
So
someone.
what I'm saying is, it is fine. Like it is ethically permissible to pull the plug on somebody who's in that state, right? But of course, you would like. In a practical matter, right? It's going to fall on whoever the family of whoever the affected person is, because
It's going to be their choice ultimately.
Even if the person isn't there anymore, right? And even if the person is basically dead, right? It's an emotionally important thing for that family. So it's almost like a property rights thing. Where, like,
The assumption
it's
you're making is that the person is dead.
Yeah.
Well, just because they're not actively moving doesn't mean, for example, the person's breathing. They've got organs. They've got the circulatory systems. They've got all of this stuff as well.
But the brain is just not functioning.
But they're just not awake. The brain is not functioning to allow them to be awake and speaking. And what you're saying is that person should die.
If the brain is totally non-functional, if we're talking about complete brain death, oxygen cut off to the brain, those brain cells are dead, then yeah.
And that would still be, in your mind, the killing of a human being.
You are killing a human being, you're not killing a person. The person is gone.
But hold on. So bear in mind, right? So really, what you're saying is there's really no rational reason to keep human beings alive.
I think there's a rational reason to keep people alive. People are what I'm concerned with, right?
So that sounds arbitrary to me.
Yeah.
You're saying, for example, a person has to have conscious activity to be a person, but the minute they don't, they're no longer a person. Sure. So it like, for example, I'm asleep in bed, right? You walk into the house, right, with an axe, right? You'd be okay with murdering me.
When I say conscious, I don't mean like unconscious as in somebody's asleep or somebody was knocked out. The consciousness that I'm referring to is like when you're asleep, there is a fundamental conscious experience that is happening, right? That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is complete brain death. You have your brain cells have been cut off from oxygen, right? They have decayed. There is no chance of that person ever coming back. That person has died, right? All you have is a body that is functioning on a machine. Right? In that example, yeah, it is permissible to kill that person, pull the plug, right? It would be a little bit insane to compel.
That for me is arbitrary, because you've decided on a whim that unconsciousness means that, in your view, unconsciousness worthy of death is when it's lights out, your brain cells are dying.
Yeah.
But the same thing can occur when you're sleeping. The same thing does occur. Your cells die in your body when you're sleeping. Did you know that?
Yeah. But
so again, if that's the measure, then we should just kill every human being that sleeps.
No, because cells dying is not my bar, right? My bar is like the lack of a conscious experience. When you're asleep, there's still brain activity. You are conscious, right? In some use of the word. There's two different ways that people use unconscious, right? If somebody knocks somebody else out, people say that's unconscious. That's not what I'm talking about, right? Because there's still there's brain activity there. That person is like the person is alive. And is.
How do you know there's not a person in there? When a person is brain dead, how do you know there's not a person in there?
Because the underlying structure that creates consciousness, right? As we understand it, the underlying structure that creates personhood comes from the functions of the brain, right?
No. So I mean, according to even for example, near-death experience, you've heard of that? NDEs, for example, people have been brain dead for 3 days, and they experience things that are borderline supernatural. For example, I'll give you one story of a woman in Holland, right? She was sent to the hospital bed, right? She lies there, she is brain dead clinically for a good few days, right? There's a shoe on a shelf right at the top of the bed. She was brain dead before she got in there, so she would not witness the shoe. She wakes up and says, "I've seen this shoe. I floated past it. I saw this shoe." Right, and it was on there, and she described it perfectly in detail. How she would have, how would she have understood what that was? Bear in mind, she never saw it in her life. But how would she have been able to give such a detailed explanation if there was nothing in there that was truly person?
So she had, assuming there was an out-of-body experience, she had returned to her body, correct? Right? And she came up and she explained these things.
Yeah.
She was not the type of brain dead I'm talking about. Because if she was truly brain dead in the way that I'm describing,
She was brain dead for 3 days.
But
her cells were dying.
Her cells were dying,
Yes.
right? But if she resurrects, I guess, and is able to speak, right? She has parts of her brain that are functional enough to enable her to speak about her experience. The person is still there, clearly, right? If she's coming back and speaking about it. That's not the kind of brain death I'm speaking about. What I'm talking about is there's zero possibility this person comes back. It is the cells have died. There's no underlying structure to enable them to act in the world as a person.
So abortion's only permissible then, and I'm going by what you've said. Abortion would only be permissible then if this being cannot in any way develop a consciousness.
Not in any way develop a consciousness, it's whether or not they have it, right? So.
But hold on, you've changed your tune. Because bearing in mind, it went from, when I gave you an instance of the woman who was brain dead for 3 days, according to you, she should have been killed from that moment.
No.
Well, she was brain dead. She was clinically brain
She
dead.
clearly had enough faculties in her brain to speak when she returned.
She was brain dead. She was as brain dead as the individual who was in the hospital dead and completely out of it.
I don't think so. I would highly doubt that. Because
I mean, you'd have to look at the story up yourself.
Yeah.
But that is a fact. She was clinically brain dead. Oh, you there, man? God bless, man.
Saw you earlier.
Yeah, I had to take on Bob in it. Yeah, but like she was clinically brain dead for 3 days, right? That's a given, right?
Sure.
So she was without a conscience. Yeah, we'll do a conclusion in a
You
bit.
can carry on. I'll go
I'm just gonna end it here and then yeah. So ultimately she was in that state for 3 days. You're telling me that if she was in that state for longer, the plug should be pulled, right? Completely pulled.
So, I guess your characterization of the story kind of defies my understanding of physiology. So maybe I'm totally wrong, and brain cells can completely regenerate from basically death. I don't think so. So I think the kind of brain death you're describing is probably quite different in degree than what I'm speaking.
I'm talking about so I'm talking about if an individual, let's say, was born without full development of the brain. They're still born, they're still functioning some way, but without full development of the brain. You would want them killed.
No.
Well, you would at least advocate for them to be killed, right? You'd be accepting that.
No, because there's still
Oh, you've changed your tune.
no. If the person
Because when the infant is in a stage where it's about to develop a consciousness, you'd be okay with that infant being murdered, but you wouldn't be okay with a developed child coming out and not having faculties or brain faculties that make them a person.
Well, I don't think not having a fully developed brain makes you not a person. So
I would suggest thinking about it. I would suggest thinking on this. Because those are two contradictory positions.
I don't think they are contradictory. Because, so if somebody comes out and their brain isn't fully developed, are we talking about
Yeah, because we've been speaking for a while. But I would suggest, look into religion, look into what we believe.
I intend to.